Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast, where we teach you a single shot of strategy every single episode. I'm Michael O'Neal here in Long Beach, California, joined by one Mircea Morariu there in Boca Raton, Florida. He and I have both been fighting a cold for the last week. How are you, bud?
I'm doing better. Thank you, sir. It was a rough past week. I rarely get sick, and usually when I do, it's not too bad, but this last week was a little rough. There were 2 days where I was only moving from the couch to the bed and from the bed to the couch.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be up and around and got a chance to play a little pickle this morning for the first time, although it was in 49-degree weather.
Jeez.
Which it's still like roughly around 49 degrees. So, I mean, it could be worse, but for Florida, it's pretty chilly. I'm not going to lie.
We will both be making judicious use of the mute button on this particular show. I think we're both coughing pretty well. Anyway, you guys, Mircea brought something up, which I think is really important, especially it's February, still at the beginning of the year. For a lot of you, the beginning of your tournament season has not happened yet. And probably over a year ago now, we did higher level version of tournament prep, which is how to prepare prior to the tournament, right, Mircea? That's kind of what we did. And
yeah, we talked about the tournament day a little bit, but I think we want to do a little more tournament 101, which a bunch of people have asked for.
Most people in general in pickleball are rec players. They don't play tournaments yet. But should you have a hankering to play a tournament, you will realize very quickly how different it is than rec play, because chances are the people that you play in that particular tournament, especially if it's a 3.5 or 4.0 tournament, may have played in tournaments before. So they will have a little more experience with some things that we're going to tell you today that are going to be maybe a bit of a surprise for you. So Mircea, like me, when I first started playing pickleball, I was playing tournaments within like a month or so, and I think you had a very similar experience with one Julie Johnson, mom of Georgia and JW.
Yep, I met her and actually JW the very first day I started playing, and a couple weeks later I asked her to play a local money ball. So, you know, in terms of tournaments, I'm all in. So
Yeah.
I like competition. And one thing it really does, it really reveals your real level. So it tells you where you are, because if you're the weaker player or if you have a weaker wing or weakness, though that weakness will be targeted early and often relentlessly in a tournament setting. You are going to feel a little bit of pressure, which you don't typically in even high-level intense rec games. You typically don't feel those butterflies and that pressure. So it's less forgiving than rec play. You get your weaknesses targeted, and often you or your partner or whatever. And you have that pressure that you really don't have in the rec play scenario.
Yeah, I think the nerviness is something that got to me really quickly in tournament play, but you end up very often playing people that are completely unfamiliar to you. I think we all get into our groove a little bit and play people we know, and you kind of know their weaknesses and things like that. Not the case at all. In tournaments, we have to do a lot of scouting. You can find out within your own game what breaks down, like what doesn't work for you, and then you can identify specific weaknesses that you have. And that's really the coolest part, is that to me, even though it's humbling, it accelerates your improvement on the court just by putting yourself in that high intensity, high pressure situation where people are going to instantly pick on your weaknesses.
Exactly. And actually, I enjoy that aspect of it, especially at the beginning of a tournament, that if I have a little bit of nerves, a little bit of butterflies, I know that it means something to me. And I actually look forward to that. So it's that little adrenaline rush. You know, we're looking for the adrenaline rush. That's we're adrenaline junkies. When we play sports, that's part of it. If I'm targeted and I have someone's targeting particularly weakness, I can work on that. And it really gives me a sense of confidence to be able to manage that. When you focus on executing when it really matters, and I've talked about this a ton, making the right ball, the right shot, just even making balls, period, at 8-all, 9-all, 10-all, that really gives you a sense of confidence. And I've preached about this in rec play, but when you do this in rec play, then you're able to translate in this tournament. you really get that confidence and it improves your game.
I don't know if you saw this, but it was a great example of what you just said, which was...
I know what you're going to say.
You know what I'm going to say about Anna Bright?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Anna Bright in the last tournament had match point, and she put her third into the net because it's as nervy as it gets. It's game 5, playing against Ben and Annalie Waters, and she puts her third into the net and they lose. This time, in this particular tournament, her third on match point was 15 feet high. Like, it was so high. Maybe not 15.
It was a borderline lob.
Yeah, it was so high, lob. But it was like a shoulder high left shoulder for Ben, but she was not taking any chances with her third. And that is one thing I want to say also about the reps is that one of the things for me that helped me manage my nerves, which can be crazy in a tournament, it's just something it's hard to train for, is the more routine you get in your game, the more you can rely on that routine to execute when you have these high pressure situations. That's kind of what I had to do for my serving because I got the yips.
What tournaments give you is a benchmark and a goal post which you're going to manage and learn in order to get to where you want to be. So give you a guidepost, if you will. So you have a goal in like 2 months, you're going to be playing a tournament, or a month, you're going to be playing a tournament. That way, you know that when you play certain rec games, you can practice those skills, and that's how you get better. But it is pretty funny because what happened in that point, because I watched that whole match, and by the way, kudos to Hayden and Anna for just playing incredible and executing a consistent, reproducible strategy that gave them winning patterns. But what happened in that point? She hit a relatively high drop to Ben on a third shot, and Ben cracked it. And what did Hayden do? Hayden reset it. So it just gives you the lesson that when you hit a ball over the net, it gives your opponents a chance to screw up, and you a chance, or you and your partner a chance to defend, which is exactly what happened. And they ended up winning that point despite a really poor quality drop to Ben Johns, which is the GOAT. All right. Yeah. And so, and when you play players like Ben and Anna Lee, like you feel like, and this is how it goes in terms of one of the things you have to get over mentally is that when you're playing better players, you feel pressure to hit better quality shots and you start making errors. So it gives you a, kind of a mental challenge that you have to still make shots, even though you're under more pressure to hit you think you got to hit quote perfect shots unquote, and you really don't. You have to hit obviously good shots, but that was a perfect example on a critical point where she just made the ball, and it was really relatively easy ball for Ben to put a lot of pressure on them, and Hayden got it back, and they ended up winning the point. So that's a great lesson.
Make them hit,
great
baby.
Job, Anna.
Make them hit. Meh. So
exactly.
Which tournaments should we choose? One thing I'll say is, we're lucky enough that pickleball has boomed, and there are a million types of different tournaments out there. Should you decide to do like a PPA or APP event, it can be a little intimidating because it's definitely a bigger stage and things like that, depending on what level you're in. But you got to choose the right tournament, and you want to generally... And sometimes you don't know if you've never played a tournament before, but you want to play your true level. So don't sandbag. I had these situations where I was in it was like a 4-0 tournament that I was playing in. And there was a guy that just ran through the bracket, including me. And he gave up, and this is not an exaggeration, for an entire day of pickleball, he gave up like 7 points. Like he just ran through. Everyone had games to 15. It was a round robin. And this guy gave up 7 total points to the group. And it's like, all right, dude, if you're going to be a 5-0 player playing a 4-0 tournament, that's what's going to happen. It's not that satisfying. At that point, just go to Amazon and buy yourself a trophy. So play your true level. And then the goal is to have fun and be in people that are in competition that are the same level as you. You guys have incredible points. That's what makes it really fun. It's not just supposed to be you're running through the bracket. It's just not. Or you don't want to get crushed either, because it just makes you want to go, I don't really want to play a tournament anymore. If I always lose to this one person that ends up sandbagging is what we call it. and plays a higher level than they are.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, you do have to understand that when you first start out, you're gonna take some bumps and bruises. When I, first started playing senior pro doubles, I was far less effective in terms of winning versus senior pro singles.
Yeah.
Like I started playing senior pro singles, which translates from a tennis style much more easily than doubles. So, you're going to take some bumps. But first of all, I'd recommend you start off with a local tournament, which is what I did. Start out with some local tournaments so you don't have to travel far. It's easy for you. You might be playing some of the same people but it'll be at least familiar for you. You'll have some familiarity. You don't have to travel too far. 100% play your level, or maybe play a little bit up if you feel that there might be some wiggle room in terms of who's playing. Definitely know your format. If it's a round robin with a playoff versus double elimination or single elimination, it really matters. Unfortunately, more tournaments are getting to pool style play in certain types of brackets, or at least having multiple matches, so you get a bunch of matches. So I really recommend that. Both the APP and the NPL, which is now the Champions Pickleball Series, or Champion Series Pickleball, they're really putting out some really good tournaments. That if you get double elimination, you get two chances. So, if you also have to know the scoring format. If you have games to 11 win by 2 or 2 out of 3, then you have a little more leeway, whereas games to 15, you don't have as much leeway. Or if it's rally scoring, you definitely don't have as much leeway. So the style of scoring really is important. So you just have to know all those and do something comfortable. And this is all supposed to be fun. So while you're going to challenge yourself, it's also going to be fun. You have to look at it as, okay, even if I lose, look at it as a data point. I always tell people, if you speed up and you lose, just don't lose. Look at that as like, that was a terrible thing. I lost the point. Look at it as a data point. So look at it in a positive way, regardless of, how you do.
I had extensive experience with both of those things that you just talked about. Number one, when my very first tournament, I lost my first round, and I didn't realize that in the consolation bracket that it was 1 game to 15. And the other thing which just happened is I played the Humana Cup. You were there actually at the APP,
Yep.
And it was rally scoring. And man, does that change how you play pickleball, because every
really does.
single point matters. And it really makes you, to our first segment, really makes you think about, you better make these balls, because it really matters when you don't make a third. You're not just losing your side out for your serve, but you're actually losing a point, and a game can go really fast if you miss a lot of balls.
Absolutely, 100%. My very first Pro Tour tournament was the first PPA in Mesa, Arizona, and it was incredibly chilly. And this was in 2020. And I played senior pro singles, and I went out there the day before, thinking I needed to get acclimated a little bit, but I didn't get quite acclimated enough to the cold weather, and I didn't know, how to play in cold weather really. And I lost first round to Dan Granat, who ended up being my first senior pro doubles partner. And I lost in singles, and I lost first round, and I thought, man, I'm gonna quit this game. I'm terrible. And then I went in the back draw and okay, 1-1. And anyway, ended up playing Scott Moore in the finals, was down 11-1, 6-0, came back and won in that one. And then I beat him 15-13 in the final, ended up winning gold after winning first round.
Wow.
Losing first round.
I
literally lost first round in a 32 draw. And I just did not adjust to the conditions immediately. It took me some time.
Yeah. When we were doing, let's say, the NPL tryouts, and I knew it was going to be indoors, I went to a local indoor place here to get reps and practice, because if you show up the day of and you're just not used to what it is, whether it's certain wind conditions that funnel in from a certain direction at this court or whatever, if you can get reps at the actual venue, that's great. Otherwise, if you can get reps in a similar situation, whether it's sunlight or wind or way, in your case, way colder, if you're playing a tournament like in Denver, I mean, you know this from being in Aspen last summer. It's crazy how much farther the ball goes at altitude than it does at sea level. I mean, it's a complete, and we say game changer. No, it really is. That is an actual game changer. You have to very much modify how you hit the ball when you're at altitude and vice versa. So it's those kinds of things that really matter, because you already have enough things to think about when it comes into playing a tournament that you don't even want to bother. You've played a lot of indoor as well. Like when you have to play an indoor venue, what are you looking for? Because it's not the same as it is an outdoor.
No, it's not. So one of the keys is really, like you said, is practicing in the environment that you're going to play in. And, that sounds intuitive, but it's just so incredibly important. Like if you're going from Florida to Colorado, you really need at least 2 days to get ready. And if you're going from Florida to Arizona, if you're going to start playing an event on Friday morning, like you can't get there Thursday night and adequately prepare, in my opinion. Like,
agreed.
At the latest, you got to get there Thursday morning to at least give yourself 24 hours if you're going to travel. Whether it's indoors, outdoors, like obviously if you're playing outdoors, if you live in Florida and you're playing outdoors in Florida, you're good. Just keep practicing outdoors. Indoors, the ball is going to be faster. There's typically more speed ups. You don't have any environmental influence of the wind, so that's really good. You're not going to get rained out, so there's a lot of pluses. There can be some court challenges in terms of the size of the court. So sometimes the footprint of the indoor courts are relatively small. And the other thing, there can be some visual challenges. So there's some venues I've played that are amazing in terms of how they've done the sight lines. And there's some places where the sight lines are just really rough. Like, for example, I've played in a venue where it was a beautiful venue, but everything was shiny or glittery or reflective. And including there's one giant mural behind the center court with all kinds of different colors. And it was incredibly tough to see. So when I'm indoors, and this is a little tip, and it's just a personal thing, when I have a choice of whether to serve or pick side, I always pick side, no matter where I am. Because there will always be a side that is a little bit better. And the way I pick is where I want to end. If it goes 3 games and the last 6 points, I want to be on the better side.
One thing I'll add to that, because the visual side for me is one of the bigger challenges, is if you are someone who wears eyewear, and you should all be wearing the carbon pivot or the carbon drift pickleball glasses. And if you want to do that, you go to carbonpickleball.com and get 10% off your order by using the promo code 402P at checkout. If you have a pair of, glasses or goggles that have multiple different lenses, try them all when you're inside or outside, and make sure that you have a remedy for whatever conditions that you might face. So definitely experiment with them, especially indoor, because things can get really weird and your sight lines can get weird and there can be a lot of visual interference, and that's not a great way to play.
Exactly. I mean, I wear eye protection all the time.
Yeah.
Even when I'm drilling. All the time.
We had a show a few episodes ago about playing in cold weather and how the ball performs. It's a much slower ball. It can crack. The heat can be a faster ball, but it also doesn't bounce as well, especially if it's a Franklin X40, which is something to know. What ball are they using? When you are playing, like if I'm at Los Cab here in Southern California, we have a ton of pros that play there, and some play APP, some play PPA, some play local tournaments. All 3 of those use different balls. So you have to make sure you know what ball they use in the tournaments you're going to play. Like if I'm used to playing the Lifetime ball, which is my favorite currently, and we switch to a Franklin, like if I'm in the middle of a rec night or something like that, and we've been playing this Lifetime all day, and then I go to a Franklin, I miss everything because it's like hitting a sponge, and it takes me a couple games to get used to it. Imagine that's a tournament now, and you've paid all this money to get in there, and you've flown there or whatever. Got to know what ball you're going to play with.
I just want to correct one thing that I thought I heard, and I may have misheard, but I thought you said with a cold ball that it's a little bit slower and the heat is faster. Like I would flip those because, we talked about this. When it's cold, it's harder. So the ball kind of flies a little bit more rather than the heat. It kind of slows down a little bit more.
If I said that, I didn't mean to. The cold definitely flies more, but the ball can crack more. And then the heat, it can slow down. And especially a Franklin can get really spongy.
Yeah, I mean, and if you play the U.S. Open and you know that sometimes they leave the Franklin balls out there in little baskets, they leave the baskets by the court.
Right.
And in April or early May in Florida, when you're leaving the baskets with the balls on the court at about 1 o'clock, it's going to be a marshmallow.
I just talked to somebody, they were playing with like a Gen 2 paddle, and they just got a Selkirk boomstick, which is a very high poppy paddle. And they were just about to play a tournament that weekend. They were like, I can't wait to, I'm like, wait, you're going to bring this brand new paddle out that you've never played with before to a tournament? That's not going to go well. So do not experiment with your equipment on tournament day. That is a terrible, terrible idea. Use the paddle that got you there. Go home with the date you brung, if you will. No last minute paddle changes. And you want to bring a backup just in case. Ideally, it's the same kind of thing. You and I have talked about a little bit, depending on the conditions. If it's really cold one day, you might have a different paddle, or you're playing singles and doubles, it might be a different paddle. But in general, you want to have a good backup for whatever reason. You could find that one of your grips is too slippery because it's too hot, and you don't have time between games to change grips, but you can change paddles that has a nice fresh grip on it. So make sure that your equipment is what you're used to.
And you definitely need one backup paddle. You really have to make sure that your paddle is approved, and you have to make sure that your paddle is approved for the particular tournament that you're playing in, which sounds intuitive again, but like you have EPA, which has UPA certified paddles. Then you have, Nationals or US Open, which has USAP. There are some tournaments like the National Pickleball League or the, now it's the Champion Series Pickleball. They allow both UPA and USAP certified paddles. So you have to make sure that your paddle is certified by whichever body is used by the tournament. That's a big thing.
On that note, when I got my Carbon Barrage, which by the way, I think you guys are going to love. One of the first things that Kyle from Carbon said is, don't play this in a tournament. It's not approved yet. Like they knew ahead of time that the date wasn't there yet, but probably by now it is. But I think it needs to come out to the public before you can have approval or something, or there's some sort of timeline involved. But you guys, by the way, are going to love that paddle. That's all.
I can't wait to try. Along those lines, everything else that goes along with the paddle. Many of us weight the paddle, so we use the lead tape. So don't add the lead tape the day of, or make sure that your backup paddle is weighted in the same fashion. So I often play with both my backup paddle and the paddle I intend to use for the tournament the week before. So I use both, make sure that they feel similar. So that's something I would highly recommend. In terms of grips, like I'm a big over grip person, so I don't like playing with the grip out of the box. For the most part, the Wilson perforated over grip, that's my favorite grip that I've ever used. I always put on fresh grips before.
How long does that last you, by the way? Because my favorite is still the very old school Tourna grip, like the one you could get in the 70s. Just when it gets really hot and sweaty out, I like that one because I think it does the best with that. But I'm curious, you're obviously in Florida. How does the Wilson hold up for you? How many games do you get out of it?
I actually get usually about 4 to 5 days, sometimes a week out of it. But when I play tournaments, I usually change the event the following day. So, because I like that fresh grip when I'm playing a pro level tournament. I will say that I used to use the Tourna grips as well. The Tourna grips last me 1 day in Florida.
Okay.
Like literally, I take it back. Like on a day like today where it's in the 40s, it'll be fine.
Right.
But in the vast majority of the year, like from, let's say, March until October, those grips will last me 1 day. So that's why I just don't use them anymore.
The regular ones, not the sticky ones. The regular ones last you a day?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
yeah, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
All right.
So, and then the shoes. So
I was in the middle of a PPA tournament, and my shoes were bothering me, and I bought a pair of Skechers literally in the middle of rounds, and I wore them. So shout out to Skechers for doing it quickly and for being comfortable enough to wear in a tournament without any real break-in. Do not recommend in general for doing that. But yeah, reliable court shoes, obviously.
Yeah, and ones you've worn already are preferable.
Yeah.
I do not want to play a tournament when I put on the shoes that morning or the day before. So I've always broken them in at least 4 to 5 days before, minimum. Yeah. It takes me a few days to break in shoes.
Yeah. What are you throwing in your bag just in case?
Oh, man, quite a few things. So I have a little bag where I have extra over grips. I have my lead tape. I have my electrical tape that, I put on the edge of the paddle. And then I have any extra tape that I need if I need to re-grip or I need to do one of my grips again or redo my lead tape. So I have that. I have my extra glasses. So I have both, sunglasses, then I have my clear glasses, I have my afternoon glasses. I have a towel. I always have my electrolytes. I love the Ultima. Ultima is my favorite one. Just, flavors. It's clean.
Like liquid IV, but it's Ultima?
Yeah,
same
Ultima.
idea? Okay.
Yeah, the liquid IV has some sugar on it, so I'm sure they probably have a different one. But anyway, and then I have food. I have power bars, different types of protein bars. Obviously, I have water, which I use with the electrolytes. I have backup clothes, and I mentioned this before that for me, like I have a bunch of socks because I like changing socks throughout the day. And then, I have one extra pair of shorts, but I have numerous shirts. So a lot of times I change my shirts and I wear sleeves. So I do the sleeves. And then I also have a hat. So I rarely wear the hat. And typically I wear like a headband that part of the reason for that is
you got a do-rag.
I got a little bit of a do-rag. Yeah. It's so
your Under Armour do-rag.
It is.
You're kind of known for it. That's your look. It's a sleeveless shirt with a sleeve and then your do-rag. That's the Mircea tournament kit.
The do-rag. Yep. It's actually considered a head wrap. And I started wearing those when I was playing squash because squash is so intense physically that you sweat like crazy and you have to wear goggles for eye protection, obviously, because you're indoors in a small confined space and people are swinging rackets. So if I wore a regular baseball cap or a hat when playing, it would often fall off when I was playing squash, or the sweat would be so bad that it would just kind of run down into my glasses. And so the head wraps were the only thing that would really, keep the sweat from coming down. And then when I play tournaments, I rarely wear the just a baseball cap because, when I go for overheads, sometimes when I hit the overheads, the cap falls off and, you don't want, if that falls in the kitchen, you lose the point. So that's why I wear the head wrap. So those are the things that I think you need in your bag. What about you? Am I missing anything?
Have you ever, by the way, used the Halo headband, which is what I used to wear playing racquetball? So it's like a wrap that you use, but it's got a little rubber strip that goes above your eyebrows, and it redirects the moisture away from your goggles. And they have a big, like a 4-inch wide, it's called the Bandit. I'm just looking at it online right now, the Halo Bandit. I'll send you the link. I'll bet you really like these a lot. The one thing I will add.
I haven't.
What's that?
I said, no, I haven't. I've never tried
Yeah, it's really cool. I just sent you the link. The one thing I will add to that is you play a lot of games for a tournament. So if you're doing a tournament weekend and you're playing more than one division, it's typically more than you'll play normally. Like you won't play for 6 hours on a day, but you might if you keep banging through rounds at a tournament. I like to have some kind of like knee sleeves, or if you twist your ankle, I might have an ankle brace or a knee brace or a Chopat strap or just a few things in your bag in case you start getting sore. If you get a sore leg or a sore elbow or something like that, but you want to keep going through, it's not bad enough to bow out of the tournament, but you're starting to feel it a little bit. I really like that. And I also like it as preventative maintenance. I've had 5 left knee surgeries. I know that when I get 2 or 3 hours into playing pickleball, my left knee is going to start bothering me a little bit. If I wear sleeves, which are, sleeves you can get on Amazon or whatever, they don't have to be crazy, I feel better for the whole day. And I'll just wear those prophylactically. You like that, doctor? just to make
Very
sure
good.
my knees don't get really bad, towards the end of the day. Because what happens often is you'll play and you'll win, and then you got to sit around for a while and you can get stiff. So anything you need to do to get stiff, I might add a jump rope to the bag in case you have you're going to go on in 10 minutes, but there's not really enough time to go do a proper warm up. Very often all the courts are taken. So I might, jump rope or do jumping jacks or something to get my body back into playing mode. And maybe this is just for people over the age of 50 that get sore between games.
Yeah, and I can't believe I forgot this. And thanks for reminding me. But the Yobo,
Yeah.
the therapeutic massage gun, that's another must. So that's really incredibly improved my recovery, decreased my soreness, helps me warm up, decrease the chance of injuries. I think that's really key. Whatever therapeutic massage gun of your choice. The reason I like the Yobo because it's very compact, it's not heavy, so that's always been great. And then also the bands that they have. We've talked about the the backpack BAK, the back body activation kit. That's also great for warm up as well.
So one thing that doesn't fly at a tournament is very often I'll step on the court and be like, hey, sorry to my partner, I'll be fully warmed up by game 3. That doesn't fly at tournaments. You do not have a game 3 if you don't play very well for the first couple of games. So you have to warm up properly, for real, when you play a tournament. The more reps you get, the more you realize how much you need to go through your entire thing. But I do feel like you need 30 minutes or at least 15 minutes of regular, your normal full warm-up routine, which we've talked about on this show before. But what's your ideal warm-up progression as you get there? And more importantly, Mircea, tell me how it is now versus when you first started playing doubles, because I bet you it's a little bit different.
Yeah, well, it's much more methodical now than it was before, for sure. The most important thing is you got to remember that you need to know what you need in terms of your warm up and what your partner needs. And I often just adapt my partner within reason. So I've had some partners that really like to warm up for a long time, like 45 minutes to an hour or more. I typically like to warm up less than that because I generally anticipate optimistically often a longer day. So when we first started playing, we had full draws with full come arounds. So I played APP tournaments when I started at 8 and finished at 11 because we had entire full come arounds.
8 a.m., 11 p.m.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That wasn't the typical day. I'm not going to tell you that was. That's obviously, when you end up in the finals or if because you're waiting for the backdraw to come through or you're playing through the backdraw and you get back to the gold. So fortunately for most tournaments, they have the US Open style where you don't have the full come around anymore. So anyway, you have to remember that when you go there to the tournament, let's say you and I are going to meet at, let's say 7:30. Okay. We start at 8:30. We're going to meet at 7:30. You don't want to get there at 7:30 because you have to park. Sometimes parking is an issue. If you know that it's a small place, it's a local park, it's not a big deal, that's fine. But if you're playing a larger tournament like the US Open or an APP tournament or a PPA tournament, there might be an issue with parking. And then you also have to check in, all right, especially the first day. So that may take a little longer. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to park, you have to walk over, you have to find a court. So if your bracket starts at 8 in the morning and you can get there at 7, that might be fine because most of the courts will probably be open. However, if your bracket starts at 10 and you meet at 9, you may have trouble finding a court because the 8 o'clock brackets have already started. So you have to keep in mind that you need a little of that extra wiggle room in terms of getting there to properly plan. If my bracket starts at 9 and I know I don't have a bye, I would typically like to start warming up around 8 o'clock hopefully you get there and you can do a combination of your standard warm up where you have a little stretching, you move, you keep your body active, kind of warm down a little bit. Warm up a little bit. And then you also get to practice the warm up with your partner. And then you also hopefully will get someone that you can play a bunch of points with, just like it doesn't even, you don't have to keep score. You can just play a bunch of points. And often it'll be like, someone will miss a serve and you just tell them, okay, hey, here you go.
Do it again. Serve me wide or serve me this way.
Yeah. And there's times where, exactly. It's cooperative. And even when like they miss a return, here, I'll serve again, take the return again. Yeah. Or even you get to the point you miss a third. Now, obviously miss fourth, fifth, that's a little ridiculous, but that's something you can consider when you're warming up.
And don't do it with the team you're going to play. That's generally not the greatest idea, I imagine.
Yeah, it's funny because I've had some partners, they absolutely refuse to play with anyone in the draw. Like,
oh, really?
Rec games the day before. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
There's some partners that will not play with anyone. I really don't care. I'll play with anyone because what happens in rec play, the day before and what happens in a warm-up is not what happens in the draw.
Yeah.
They're completely different things. And you should be aware of that. You can use certain things to pick up on your opponents if you want to go out there and watch. You can definitely get some tips. Again, tournament play is not rec play and vice versa.
So one of the things I mentioned, Mircea, was very often it'll be a break because you have to wait for other matches to end. Let's say you guys won your best 2 out of 3 and you did it quickly. You were much better than that team. You have to wait until all of the other games are finished so that bracket can go to the next level. And sometimes that can be an hour. Sometimes it can be 2. For some of us, taking that long of a break can make us really stiff. And I'm sure that at the senior pro level, a lot of people feel like that. So what are some of the things you like to do to kind of stay warm when you've got downtime or that like in 35 minutes, your number's going to get called again?
Well, I got to tell you, this might be a little bit out of the box, but for me, one of the biggest keys regarding this topic is hydration. And hydration doesn't start the day of the tournament. I'm a huge, huge proponent of hydration on a daily basis. Personally, I had a kidney stone when I was 14, and part of it was related to dehydration when we were practicing back in the old days when, you could only have a drop of water after practicing for like 2 hours in the Florida heat. That was your reward.
Yeah, we used to win the Coke. If you hit the Coke while you served, you could get the can of Coke, which was amazing.
Exactly.
In South Florida.
So basically I've been hydrating like crazy since I was 14 and knock on wood have not had any recurrence. But the biggest mistake that I think people make is they hydrate like the day of the tournament. And if hydration is not your priority on a regular basis, which for me it is, you really need to do it at least 2 or 3 days before the tournament, minimum. And my hydration is to the point where when I finish a match, I like go to the bathroom, fill up my water, get some food. So like my intermatch preparation consists of those 3 things as a priority. And then beyond that, I do some light movement, a little bit of stretching. I do the yobo, the therapeutic massage gun. Sometimes you do some shadow swings. You just, basically keep your body active to a point, but also got to get some rest. So I typically don't, walk around and, chat to multiple people. I like to, just kind of chill in the pro tent or just chill in a quiet area where I can, sit down and not have to do a million things. I like to, have my mind focused on the tournament rather than a million different things. So I try to keep my focus and prioritize. I typically have a protein bar between each match. I have a ton of water or electrolytes or combination of the 2 and get some rest and focus on the next match.
Love that. Yeah, you're pretty locked in as you go throughout the day, which I think is a really, really good plan. One thing we didn't mention, but can happen, especially when you play a really long day, is you can cramp. You can get a lot of cramping. If you haven't gotten enough electrolytes during the course of the day, it's nice to have some things that are helpful. Like you have the liquid IV. That has a lot of salt in it, which helps with muscle cramps. There's just a lot of weirdness in your body when you ask it to do what you're not used to. Typically, we're in for a couple of hours. We play our 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and we go home. It's very different when you spend the entire day on a pickleball court and what can happen to your body. So you just want to be prepared with pickle. They have literal pickle juice shots. And if you're playing in a bigger tournament, by the way, like a PPA or APP, or even one of the bigger local tournaments, they'll have a lot of this stuff. They'll have bananas and they'll have snack bars and things like that. But don't rely on that. You don't know what's going to do to your stomach. Just have your routine and lock in with what they have. And that's usually a really good plan.
Yeah, don't depend on the food there. Oftentimes they will have food trucks or snacks. I mean, sometimes the snacks are like these cheese and crackers that, we used to have in the 1980s in, the vending machines that I really wouldn't feed to my dog. So
yeah,
no offense. But I mean, sometimes they have stuff like that, or they'll have like, I've been to the, US Open, for example, and they have like a food truck with Indian food. And I don't know about you, I love Indian food, but not at a tournament. And for me, I typically don't like a heavy meal, right before I play.
Yeah.
So I rarely will have a traditional lunch, like a big, I love, sandwiches. And during a tournament, I'm not really sure when I'm playing. So unless I'm very confident that I have, maybe an hour and a half break or something, I typically don't have a full meal. So
yeah.
The other thing is you have to be careful with some of the electrolyte powders that are filled with sugar, because then you'll get a little bit of a, sugar crash. And again, I've talked about nutrition and hydration. You really just do not want to get dehydrated. It's not good for your muscles. It's going to increase the chance of injury. It's not good for your concentration. Caffeine is another thing that you can consider. How are you about energy drinks, Michael?
I was just about to say, I might have a few 5-hour energies in my bag. Get to that 2:00 in the afternoon, especially if I got up early or I flew in. Like when I did NPL, the West Coast to East Coast thing, and we were on court at 7:00. It was 4 a.m. for me when I got on the court, which means I got up at 2:30 a.m. to play pickleball, which is bonkers. Yeah. So yes, I definitely consumed a Red Bull or 5-hour energy or coffee. I just don't drink coffee, which is why I do that. But in general, yes, I'm okay with caffeine. But to your point, there's a crash sometimes. It just depends on how you time your crash, I guess.
Again, it depends on your personal preference and what you typically do. Just make sure you're not doing something completely different. And if you do try energy drinks, don't try them the day of the tournament.
No, that's a bad idea.
Listen, I was coaching at the Texas Open one time, a PPA tournament. I was coaching J-Dub and Dylan and Georgia and J-Dub. And so I wasn't playing at all. And there was an energy company an energy drink company there. And, they had the samples. And, it was later in the day, and the guy's like, "Oh, you want to try?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll try one." So it tasted really good. So I had like 2 or 3 of them.
Woo!
Actually, I had 3. And, I was fine because
he's a doctor, you guys.
Really bother me.
Yeah.
But the caffeine, because I typically have, probably 2 pots of coffee total daily. So caffeine doesn't really affect. I can drink coffee at 10 o'clock at night, go to sleep like a baby.
Whoa. You said you drink 2 pots of coffee a day?
Correct. Roughly.
Total. Holy moly.
Yeah. Well, it's a habit I guess I've picked up, since
being
I was
a doctor.
in med school. And
yeah, right.
And fortunately, more and more evidence is out there regarding the positive effects of coffee. But anyway, I digress. So the next morning, after I had those energy drinks, I woke up like I typically don't drink that often, but I mean, I woke up like I had the worst hangover that I can remember of all time. And I think I've had like 3 hangovers in my life, and this was one of them. It was brutal.
1,200 milligrams of coffee per day, you guys. That's what the doctor recommends.
But it wasn't. It was something in the energy drink that just did not agree with me. Yeah. So again, don't take stuff that you haven't taken before. Even the electrolyte stuff. Don't use the electrolytes the day of that you haven't tried, the week before. make sure it agrees with you.
Agreed. That is 100%. Guys, believe it or not, we're only halfway through this tournament prep, but we're going to cut this off to the next show where we're going to cover tournament logistics, what it's like to play with a ref if you've never done that before, which is crazy, mental preparation and what to do on the court, which is a way, way, way bigger factor than you think, strategic tournament mindset, things that you would play or do in rec that would be a terrible idea to do in a tournament or vice versa, and mistakes that we make very often at a tournament, and then anything else we can come up with. Mircea, thank you. I've got to run, but this is a great part one of this particular show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael. Thanks for your patience.
All right, guys, you've now just listened to another episode of 4.0 to Pro. This was not exactly pocket size, but it's a lot of information we got to disseminate here. And what else you got to do? Let's say your commute to the court is an hour today instead of 20 minutes. All right, guys, we'll talk to you next time.
You got to go back and forth, right?
That's right. That's right. You keep listening. You don't stop audiobooks just because they're too long, right? Guys, thank you. For Mircea, I'm Michael. You guys keep on rocking. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.